Hello, this is George from the Delaware Jet Factory. A friend of mine wants me to build one of these Grumman F7F Tigercat models. We couldn't find any commercially available kits in any size, but he found this. It's an FMS foamy twin. It comes complete with all the servos, 2 motors, retract doors, decals, everything. So it's I guess 1700 millimeter wingspan. It's quite nice actually, and so I'm going to build this to get some inspiration to see if I really want to go ahead and scratch build a big one. Comes in a nice box with a real sturdy foam container that held all the parts in very nicely. There was no damage whatsoever. So this is just the back of the box. Like I say, it was very well packaged. I'm impressed with the packaging. Hopefully the plane will be this good. So these are the specs. The wingspan is 66 inches. The overall length is 58 inches. It weighs 5.2 kilos. It has 2 pretty nice brushless motors in it. 60 amp ESC. It has a lot of servos in it, but it only requires a 6-channel radio. I'll get into that later. They use a lot of Y connectors. So, on to the build. So I'm going to go through the build basically step by step, only if there's issues. The plane is really all done. The servos are mounted, the wiring is done, the motor is done, the retracts are done. And if I run into any issues, you'll hear about it here. So stand by for that. Okay, problem number 1, the elevators go on. There's a two spars, a connector, and these are supposed to slide into here, so it's screwed on. But the problem is that this surface here, the molding on it or the paint on there is such that you can't, it's hard to slide this in. So this has to be sanded lightly, so this seats fully on that to get the screws in. So I'm just sanding down the mating surfaces here with a medium sanding bar just to knock off the high spots where it enters the fuselage. Shouldn't take long. Okay, once that's sanded, there's no gap here, and these screw in with metric screws. These are I think it's a 4mm head. I'm not sure, maybe 2 millimeters. Anyway, it screws in, holds them nice and tight. There's no gap. Okay, something I found while putting these elevator halves on is when you grab the control surface and move it, you can see the servo is a little bit loose inside there. I don't like that. I'm used to building high-speed planes, and this is something that would cause flutter. So I'm going to take that apart and tighten that up. Okay, so what's going on here, when that top is screwed on, it just holds this servo in this little pocket. But as you can see, there's a little bit of extra play in there on the sides of the pocket. So that's easy to fix with some good tape in there. I'll put some shims in there. It'll tighten the pocket up, so when I put the top on, no more play. I will check all the servos in this plane now that I found this. At least the ones that are mounted this way. Later. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm cutting strips of aluminum tape. It's a 3M tape. Pretty good stuff, good adhesive. I'm wrapping around these tabs here for 2 layers on top and 2 layers on bottom. When I shove it in, it'll be nice and tight. Okay, with that tape on there, this servo is now locked in pretty good. And then I'm going to put another little piece under the top, so when I screw it on, it'll put a little extra pressure on the top of the servo to hold it in. So I'll do, whenever I find a servo like this in this plane, I think there's like 3 or 4 more, I'll use this method to make sure the servo can't move later. Okay, so now that everything is fitting and the servos are tight, one thing I use on all planes, especially gasoline and turbine powered planes, is some kind of a lock on the connector here. Now there isn't a whole lot of room in there to put this kind on, so I'm going to use dental floss, which is something I've done for years. Okay, so that makes the connectors nice and secure. You just put 5 or 6 knots in it and cut it off, and you're ready to go. And I'll do this to all the connectors in the plane that are in a confined space like this. Makes it safe later. Just in the for what it's worth department, the rudder servo is screwed in, so that servo is nice and tight. It's not doesn't move, so we're good there. Okay, so before I go to the rest of the plane, the next installation is the motor nacelles onto the wings and then the wings onto the fuselage. I'm going to test the elevators and the rudder. So one of the things I've done, I make sure my subtrims are all at 0, because each channel runs multiple servos. The rudder works the rudder plus the nose gear steer. One elevator channel works 2 elevators. So it's important that when you start, everything's everything's at the 0 line. So looking at the plane, the rudder servo. Here again, remember the rudder is keyed into the nose gear steering. So the centering on this is off. So if I fix this with the subtrim, I might have to go back and mechanically change the nose gear steering or vice versa. But I'll go ahead and change this now. Okay, that's pretty good. Now the elevators are off a little too. You can see the left one is a little higher than the right one. So you have to get one of them right with the subtrim, and the other one has to be done mechanically. So as I look across the plane from either side, this one is perfect, and this one is down a little bit. So I have to correct that mechanically later. That is done here by taking this screw out and turning this clevis here till they both line up. And this will have to be done on all the flight surfaces on the plane, because you can't adjust them individually. It's no big deal really, you just have to do it the old-fashioned way, mechanically. Okay, that's pretty good. Now we'll move on to the wings. Later. Okay, the next step is to mount the engine nacelles on each wing. The engine, there is a left and a right nacelle, and basically there's a long portion here that matches up with the flap. There's a short portion here that matches up to that flap. So this goes on here, and all these connectors get hooked up, and it screws on from the top. This also contains a landing gear and a motor. Very clever. The motor plugs in here. Servos plug in here. There's 2 of them. Now before doing this, I'm going to go ahead and fix and tighten up these servos. These are the same type of servo mounts that were in the elevator. So I'm going to make sure that these are all tight before I put the nacelle on. More to follow. Okay, so one wing is done. The nacelle is on there. Like I said, this contains the landing gear and the motor for that side. Power plug for the motor driver. And this is the plug for the signal for the motor. And this goes in the plane in a Y. And then this plugs into the receiver for both sides. This is kind of neat, or unique. Let me show you that. So this plug contains the power and the signals for the 2 flap servos and the aileron servos. So it's flap, power, signal for 2 flap servos, and for the aileron signal, it's power, signal. So when you assemble the plane and you screw it on, these plug into sockets on the side of the fuselage. Unique. I've never done that before. Something new. On to the next wing. Well, it's all together, ready for testing. So tomorrow we'll test all the servos and then get into the motor rotation and the landing gear. So it's a pretty neat looking plane. There's 3 different decoration choices. They're decals, and we'll get into all that tomorrow. See ya. Okay, with the wings together in the fuselage, I can test the ailerons and the flaps. I'm very happy to say that they work perfect the first time everything was plugged in. The flaps too. Mechanically, the flaps only required a little bit of mechanical adjustment, not much, 1 or 2 turns on 2 of the turnbuckles. Also, with the wings plugged in, the outer left wing has a red light. Although you can't see it here, the outer right wing has a green wingtip light. Very nice. A lot of thought. Okay, testing the landing gear and the motors. Gear down. Works great. The nose wheel steers. It's in the right direction to the rudder. All good. Gear up. Pretty slick. The motors are fine on power up. So I'm pretty much done with the plane at this point in terms of the basic build. And now I'm going to move on to adding the decorations. So the model comes with these decal sheets. There's actually 3 different schemes here you can set it up as. So I'm going to just pick one of the schemes and start putting them on later.